210 milliseconds. In the high-stakes world of military aviation, that is the speed of survival. It is the time it takes for a visual signal to strike your retina, travel down your optic nerve, and trigger a physical reaction in your fingertips. It is, quite literally, the speed of a blink. But when you starve the human brain of sleep, this silent, invisible deterioration begins. The warning light flashes. Your brain registers the threat, but your hand doesn't move. For nearly half a second, you are technically asleep, with your eyes wide open. Sleep researchers call this a microsleep. In a fighter jet traveling at Mach 1.5, that half-second delay means you have traveled over 200 meters without a pilot at the controls. By the time your prefrontal cortex boots back online, the window of opportunity is gone. For the last half-century, modern militaries have faced a silent, systemic crisis. It is not a shortage of missiles or a failure of radar. It is the physical limits of the human machine. How long can you run an elite brain at 100% capacity before the cognitive engine fails? The scientific consensus is unforgiving. 16 hours. Past that threshold, your decision-making capacity doesn't just decline, it collapses. And in the late 20th century, as combat operations shifted into a 24-hour, non-stop theater of war, the hunt was on for a chemical bypass to sleep itself. The breakthrough did not happen in a classified military bunker. It began in a quiet, nondescript laboratory near Paris. In 1974, chemists working for Laboratoire Lafon were screening novel compounds for analgesic properties. They synthesized a molecule called adrafenil, designated in their research logs as CRL40028. But when they administered it to lab animals, they observed something completely unexpected. The mice did not get sleepy. They did not get frantic or hyperactive like they would on amphetamines. They became curiously still, calm, and intensely watchful. 2 years later, in 1976, the Lafon chemists refined the compound. They isolated its active metabolite, removing the molecular groups responsible for liver toxicity. The new compound was named modafinil. It was 4 times more potent, longer lasting, and far cleaner. But Lafon was a small civilian pharmaceutical company, and they had little interest in marketing a drug that nobody seemed to understand. To unlock its true potential, they had to send it to Lyon, to the laboratory of a man who had spent his entire life studying the dark. Professor Michel Jouvet was a giant of 20th century neuroscience. He had spent decades mapping the brain structures that govern REM sleep and wakefulness. When Jouvet's team administered modafinil to laboratory cats and monitored their brainwaves, they were stunned. Under the influence of the drug, the animals spent the entire night awake. They did not pace, they did not show signs of physical stress, and they did not exhibit the jittery, manic behavior associated with classical stimulants. They simply remained awake, calm, and cognitively present. By 1983, Jouvet was quietly administering modafinil to human patients suffering from narcolepsy with spectacular results. But Jouvet, who took the drug himself to work 18-hour days, knew that his research had implications far beyond civilian medicine. In March of 1987, at a NATO defense conference in Lyon, Jouvet stood before an audience of military planners and intelligence officers. He made a public assertion that sent shockwaves through the defense community. Modafinil could keep an army on its feet and fighting for 3 days and nights, with no side effects. The timing of Jouvet's announcement was not a coincidence. The French Defense Procurement Agency, the DGA, was already funding secret trials in Jouvet's laboratory. The military was desperate to understand the biology of exhaustion, because when a soldier, a pilot, or an executive goes without sleep, the brain undergoes a violent, hour-by-hour degradation that no amount of willpower can stop. During the first 16 hours of wakefulness, your brain holds its ground. Performance remains relatively stable, but once you cross into hour 17, the biological bill comes due. Between hours 16 and 22, your brain's error rates spike. The number of attentional lapses on standard reaction tests increases up to 8-fold. By the time you reach 24 hours of continuous wakefulness, your cognitive performance has degraded by 30 to 40%. You are functionally operating with the cognitive equivalent of a 0.1% blood alcohol level. By hour 36, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive command center, is starving. Neuroimaging shows a massive drop in glucose metabolism across the frontal lobes. This is the very region that manages risk assessment, working memory, and emotional control. Under sleep deprivation, your brain waves literally slow down. The latency of your brain's cognitive processing speed stretches out, measurable in painful milliseconds. Why does the prefrontal cortex fail first? Because it is the most metabolically expensive real estate in your skull. It is the heavy consumer of the brain's energy grid. When you starve the system of rest, the brain initiates a series of brownouts to protect its core survival networks in the lower brainstem. Your ability to integrate complex tactical information, adapt to changing circumstances, and control impulsive behavior evaporates. In military field studies, the abstract numbers of the laboratory become terrifyingly concrete. After 3 days of sustained operations with restricted sleep, soldiers' ability to identify and engage targets decreases by over 200%. Their errors in tactical decision-making shoot up by 86%. In marksmanship tests, sleep-deprived soldiers shoot at friendly targets, completely unable to discriminate friend from foe. Crucially, when asked how they performed, they consistently state that their performance was unchanged. They are blind to their own decay. This was the baseline crisis that led the French military's ethics committee, the CESA, to hold a secret meeting on June 13, 1990. With a massive international coalition assembling in the Persian Gulf, they knew their forces would face unprecedented operational demands. They authorized the large-scale deployment of modafinil under the code name Operation Dauphin. The instructions to the medical officers were clear: maintain absolute discretion. During Operation Desert Storm in January of 1991, nearly 1,000 French soldiers, primarily fighter pilots and helicopter crews, were quietly given modafinil under the military code name Ordinator. At the time, the drug had not yet received civilian market approval. It was a pre-registration, real-world deployment of a chemical edge. Pilots flew grueling 48-hour continuous missions over the desert, relying on the little white pills to keep their prefrontal cortex online. Historically, militaries had kept their pilots awake using dextroamphetamine, commonly known as go pills. But amphetamines are blunt instruments. They flood the entire brain with dopamine, triggering a sympathomimetic storm. They keep you awake, but they also trigger cardiovascular stress, paranoia, and a brutal sleep rebound that disrupts subsequent recovery. In 2003, a tragic friendly fire incident in which 2 American pilots mistakenly bombed Allied Canadian soldiers was partially blamed on the cognitive distortions caused by amphetamine go pills. Modafinil was different. It was an atypical dopamine transporter inhibitor. It blocked dopamine reuptake slowly and selectively, avoiding the euphoric spike and subsequent crash of amphetamines. More importantly, it activated the orexin and histamine pathways in the hypothalamus, the master wakefulness switches of the brain. It didn't force the brain into a state of chemical panic. It simply removed the biological obligation to sleep. In 1995, a landmark study conducted by the Canadian military directly compared modafinil, amphetamines, and a placebo during 64 hours of continuous mental work. The results confirmed the French military's field data. Modafinil maintained the subject's reaction times, logical reasoning, and short-term memory at near baseline levels. And when they finally went to sleep, their sleep architecture was completely normal. There was no REM deficit, no massive cardiovascular rebound, and no chemical hangover. But the Canadian researchers uncovered a hidden psychological side effect that would change the way we understand cognitive enhancement forever. It was a phenomenon they called the overconfidence trap. While the soldiers on modafinil performed significantly better than the placebo group, they consistently and massively overestimated their own cognitive accuracy. 2 to 4 hours after taking the drug, they felt invincible. They believed they were operating at peak genius, even when their objective reaction times were beginning to slip. Today, we are no longer talking about military pilots flying fighter jets over desert sands. We are talking about modern knowledge workers, founders, developers, and finance professionals operating in their own high-pressure cockpits. To survive 80-hour work weeks and manage constant cognitive loads, we bombard our brains with a chaotic mix of caffeine, energy drinks, prescription stimulants, and unverified supplements. We are engaged in a daily, high-stakes biohacking experiment. But just like those soldiers in the 1995 military study, we are running completely blind. We take focus compounds based on vibes and subjective feelings of alertness. But subjective feeling is a terrible gauge of cognitive reality. You might feel incredibly sharp after your third cup of coffee or a research chemical smart drug, but you have no objective way of knowing if your speed-accuracy trade-offs are failing, if your working memory is degrading, or if you are quietly down-regulating your acetylcholine receptors, setting yourself up for a massive cognitive crash next week. This is the exact gap we set out to close when we built Nootropic.ai. We realized that the ultimate lesson of 40 years of military research is that you cannot safely optimize what you do not objectively measure. If you want to perform like an elite machine, you need a feedback loop. You need to know your cognitive baseline before you touch a single focus compound. At Nootropic.ai, we don't believe in generic one-size-fits-all brain vitamins. We recognize that every brain is a unique biological instrument with its own neurochemical biotype. Our system begins by mapping your cognitive baseline using validated reaction and vigilance protocols. If you are the overwhelmed optimizer, currently taking a dozen different supplement bottles with no objective tracking, our system identifies the clutter, eliminates the shelf waste, and provides a highly focused, clean protocol that pays for itself by removing ineffective ingredients. If you are the evidence-hungry experimenter, our dashboard syncs directly with your wearable data, mapping your sleep latency and heart rate variability against your daily focus curves so you can see the exact N-of-1 proof of what is working. And if you are the anxious high performer, fighting the constant threat of burnout and chronic stress, our algorithm builds custom safety gates into your protocol, using clinically backed adaptogens to manage your cortisol cycles and protect your prefrontal cortex from the toxic effects of overexcitation and anxiety. The military spent 4 decades and millions of dollars searching for a chemical bypass for human limits. But they proved that pushing the brain blindly only leads to the overconfidence trap and systemic decay. True cognitive dominance is not about overriding your biology, it is about mastering it. It is about closing the feedback loop between how you feel and how you actually perform. Stop running your brain blind. Stop guessing with your focus. Comment military below, and we will instantly send you the direct private link to map your cognitive baseline, identify your unique neurochemical biotype, and claim your free personalized stack at Nootropic.ai. Let's see what your engine is actually capable of when it's running on a clean, balanced, and objectively measured protocol.